Today's guest is Linda Babulic, who shares her interesting story of spiritual transformation. Although she was raised a Catholic, she had a deep desire to explore the non-denominational spiritual world. At midlife, after years of working as a corporate trainer and raising her children, a lunchtime conversation with a friend led to a week-long spiritual quest in a Canadian forest that changed the trajectory of her life. As she nears her 70th birthday, her passion and wisdom are evident. I hope her story inspires you to, as Linda says, zest your life. So we are here today, and I have as my guest Linda Babulic, and Linda is from Canada, and Linda and I share the same business coach. So we actually met in a Facebook group when I was looking for inspiring stories of transformational change at 50 or older, and Linda has a very interesting story. Hers is of a spiritual journey, and we've talked a lot before this, so I might, as she's talking, ask her or prompt her to answer some other questions. But what I want to do is just start with Linda sharing a little bit about who she is and where she comes from and a little bit about her family. So go ahead, Linda.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm in Ottawa, Canada now, and I'm married. I've been with my husband, first and only, 48 years. So you can guess I'm more than 50 years old because I wasn't 2 when I got married. It's hard to do the math on how old I am. And we share 2 children and 4 granddaughters. Now, here's a little funny thing. Mm-hmm. Each of the children, our son and our daughter, each have 2 girls. We have 4 granddaughters, but only 3 birthdays.
Ah, interesting.
How did that happen?
Yeah.
Our daughter's youngest was born on our son's oldest birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so there's like 3 birthdays, and they're all smacked together. They're all end of September, beginning of October.
That's great. And how old are they?
The oldest one is 13. Okay. And then the next one is 12, and the other 2 just turned 10.
Okay.
So they were like, I had my daughter-in-law and my daughter both exploding within 5 days of each other.
That is so exciting. Yes.
Yeah.
Do they live close by with each other?
They're about a 6-hour drive apart.
Okay.
But when they're together or they're on FaceTime, especially the little ones, I'm accredited with their personality. They're very, very zesty.
Yeah, very.
All the time. So it's great. I just have
grandchildren have the best personalities. I like to say I'd rather be with them than anybody. So yeah, it must be in the genes.
I think so. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I will say to the listeners that Linda is an author. So the reason she brought up Zest is because she has a book called Zest Your Life. And so we'll talk about that and probably a little bit later. But yeah, so that is really cool too. I love talking to authors because I someday would like to write a book. So I admire people who have done that. I know it's a lot of work. So.
And it's interesting because it just occurs to me as you're saying that I don't think I could have written about book without having that spiritual awakening that I had, without going through that spiritual journey. Mm-hmm. It gave me a lot of different things, but I never thought of it. But the book is a result of that.
Mm-hmm. So when I think of spiritual quests or journeys, I always think of the book Eat, Pray, Love.
Yes. Yeah. One of my favorites.
Yes. And she had a meltdown, for those who aren't familiar with it, she's very unhappy in her life. She had a meltdown in her bathroom. She told her husband she didn't love him anymore and wasn't happy. And then she picked up and left for a year. But, so I always think, you completely change your life. But here you're still married to the same man. So he let you go off on your adventure. So it was such
that was not really that makes it sound like I needed his permission, which I didn't.
Yes.
We agreed I said I wanted to do this, and he certainly supported me.
Well, that's good. You found a great man. So,
I shopped a lot.
yes, well, good, good. So, tell me about your life before the spiritual journey. What were you doing, and what led you to the decision to go on this?
Okay, I was doing corporate training. I have my own corporate training company I got into a niche market with the auto parts to suppliers to Honda. So I was teaching effective communication, problem solving, fundamentals of leadership, all those kinds of time management, all that kind of stuff. But as we know, our business life is only one section of our pie. We have more in our pie.
Hmm. Yes. And so, were there pieces of your pie that were missing or stale, or I don't know what's the best?
Well, I think the fundamental difference change that I went through was that before I went on my vision quest and did all of those things, I was a, a home mother. Well, I was working, but I had children at home. I had teenagers to raise. And so there was, the thought of that, it's a nice idea, but I don't think that's going to happen. It never, how it's sort of like that story about they couldn't see the ship until somebody said, hey, that's a ship, or certain cultures can't see the color blue. Well, it was the same thing. It just never occurred to me that I could do that. And then I started doing more. I was always attracted to reading like Linda Andrews, a medicine woman, all that kind of stuff, all the Aboriginal stuff greatly attracted me. And then I started to think about it and spoke to a friend of mine. We were having lunch and he said, my wife's doing that kind of stuff. And I really? He says, oh yeah, she goes and does these weekend things and in the summer. So then I talked to her and I got the brochure, and that's how I went on my first vision quest. And after spending a week on the land, then I signed up and I was with them for 6 years studying shamanic studies.
And how did that conversation come up over lunch, out of curiosity? Just because a lot of times we think these things, but we don't actually verbalize them.
It was a long time ago now, so I'm trying to remember. But David is a very philosophical kind of guy. And so it was we were talking probably about the books we were just reading. And so we often discussed, and I love discussing books. I read all kinds of books, as you know, because you've been following me on Facebook. I'm, Think and Grow Rich, Mary Magdalene, I'm reading Michelle Obama's. I'm going back to reading The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The books stack up.
Yeah.
But, we were probably discussing a book, and then that subject came up.
Interesting. Okay, and so how long from that lunch to that quest
Well, the lunch was probably in the fall because we were doing some planning with the United Way. He was the executive director at the United Way at the time. And so I got on their newsletter, and in the early spring, they announced when their vision quest was going to be and some stuff about their programs. So I signed up for it. It was, only a few hours drive away. And it was camping for a week. And there were going to it's a huge former farm that they own with a farmhouse, but lots of land. It's no longer farmed. It's gone fallow. So there's lots of trees but a lot of history to the land because it had been settled. And so I packed up my car and my tent and all my equipment, and off I went for a week of camping and adventure, not knowing really what I was headed in for. But I always have my car and I can always go home.
So I always think about before I go on a trip, and you have expectations around a trip and maybe something that you're most looking forward to. So was there one thing that stood out that said, oh, I definitely want to do this. I definitely want to go on it because it has that one thing that I really wanted to do?
There was no Wi-Fi service. There was no cell service.
You wanted to unplug. Yeah.
There was an emergency phone number because there's a landline in the farmhouse that I left at home, but it was to just not have any responsibilities. And it was only when I arrived there that I realized that I cherished those times because of that. I didn't have to account to anybody about anything. If I showed up to the classes, you were responsible for yourself. If you didn't show up, if you were late, don't interrupt, tough bananas. If the door is locked, because certain ceremonies, the door is locked, you can't come in once it starts. If you missed it or you slept, as I did once, too bad. So sad, but you're not going to come into the room because that's the rules. And I fell asleep. I missed it. So it was really a good thing for me to just unplug. You know, if I slept, I was meant to sleep. It was probably because I hadn't slept for a few days. So it was nice that I needed to do that. So it was really to be able to stand on our own with zero responsibility except myself. It had been so many years. I can't remember a time before that I'd ever had that, because my mother died when I was only 17. So I had a younger brother and sister to take care of. And I was always working. I started working when I was 15 years old. So I always had responsibilities.
Interesting. So on the other tail end of that, so you come home from your trip and you're like, okay, you're assessing what was the best thing of the trip. Maybe not what was it in the expectation, or unplugging, maybe that was good, but obviously you had some experiences that made you continue on your journey. So tell me, what were the highlights of that?
So the big thing was that I then signed on to their 4-year program. And it was, there's going to be more learning. I can do more of this. I can know more. And one of the teachers, Gail, has this beautiful way that when she talks to you, you just, and there were, you know, there'd be people standing all around wanting to talk to her. And you know how sometimes you talk to some people and they're like this, and you feel like, you know, they're waiting for you to shut up or move on or whatever. She has this wonderful energetic ability to just connect with you. And you feel like there's nobody else in the world. And I thought, I want some of that. I want to know how to connect on such a deep energetic level that there's no interruptions, that I can focus just exactly like I am right now on only talking to you.
So I wonder, so you really felt like you got inside yourself from
Absolutely.
the trip. Did you ever have a time before in your life that you felt that there was something within you that wanted that, but because life was getting in the way, you couldn't do it? Or was that just something that was an evolving thing that just kind of came to light in right about the time you turned 50?
It's an interesting question, because for me, I didn't know that that was the missing piece. And sometimes you don't know the missing piece until you found the piece.
Yes.
You know, it's really putting that jigsaw puzzle together. Or when you're carrying a load that's too heavy, it's only when you put it down that you realize how much you've been chugging along for all of those years. And it felt like that. It felt like I left behind a whole bunch of regrets and worries and emotions. You know, when you're 17, it's hard to process your mother's death.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that just got released. It just went back to wherever it came from, into the ether, back into the energy of the world. And I got to understand more about energy. All that world we don't see, I didn't know enough about it. I knew there was a lot, and there's still a lot of mysteries. That's why they call it mystery school. And I got to know a lot more. And because of that, it opened the channels in me, because I believe that you and I were connected before. I believe that we've sat around the fire. We've had these discussions before, and we've connected on a very deep level to be able to move our lives ahead. And I was able to reconnect to some of those cellular memories from my ancestors and from other women that I sat in a circle with.
That's amazing. I love that. So big soul connection there. And when we talked previously, you talked about one of the powerful exercises that you did. Do you want to share that? It was the nighttime one.
That was my, it's called the Night on the Mountain of Fear.
Was that on the agenda that you were looking at before you went, or did you? It was. Okay, so you knew
ceremonies. It didn't, but you don't know what is a ceremony, or you don't know what a ceremony is.
Okay.
And, the first, when you arrive, they give you all the introduction, they give you the lay of the land, and you say, okay, you've got a choice. You're going to pick a partner, and you're going to decide, because one night you're going to do one ceremony, the next night you're going to do the next one. So one night it was the Night on the Mountain of Fear, and the next one was called the Hole in the Ground ceremony. So I picked the biggest, strongest person I saw in the room, and it was a big guy. I thought, if I have to dig a hole, I want a big guy on the other shovel. So that was my big motivation. I'm not going to pick somebody that's never handled a shovel before. And it turns out that he had handled a shovel before, and he was fully capable of digging a hole. Plus, it had to be a little larger. Otherwise, mine would have it might have been small, and I would have felt more confined. But I thought, I'm going to have the excuse of having a little wider hole because he's 6'4", large. So
great idea.
That was my big motivator, sneaky.
Share a hole with somebody?
No, I was all by myself.
Oh, okay.
He was all by himself in the hole, but it had to be big enough to fit him too. So, but you got to dig the hole together. And all of that is done in silence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's your first experience of a word fast. You've heard of a food fast? Mm-hmm. This is a word fast. And it's so delightful because when you're not talking and you're in the woods, you can hear the birds singing. You can, hear the rustle of the leaves in the trees. You can see it was the height of the monarch butterflies. It was just fantastic because you could see the monarch butterflies all through the field with you. So it heightens all your other senses when you can close off your ears and not stick ear pods in there. You don't need those.
Yes, that's interesting. Maybe that's the life of an introvert. They hear a lot more than us extroverts. I don't know what you are, but I'm an extrovert. And so I could use a lot of word fasts, I think.
Yeah, it's a miracle. I really think we do need it for our survival. We just don't even know it.
Yeah.
So the first ceremony was the Hole in the Ground ceremony. And that's where you're going to be sitting up because you have a flashlight, you have your sheets of paper, you have to answer some questions. You're going to really go introspective. And then they come over, it's covered with a tarp in case it rains. And you've got, logs and stuff. So if you do freak out, there's always an out. You just stand up and push the tarp away. And I must admit, I did put a little cove so I could see out because it was a full moon and I wanted to see the moon. I could see these slivers of light and I wanted to be sitting there all night looking at the moon while I did my ceremony. So that was quite glorious. And then
let me ask, you're not allowed to sleep during that evening? You're supposed to stay awake? Right. Yes.
You have clearer visions when you're awake. When you're asleep, you have dreams.
Okay.
And so that's the goal, is to stay awake all night and to really listen to spirit talking to you, which is your subconscious. You can call it great spirit, you could call it the universe, but it's your subconscious. There's nothing that's going to go on that didn't get put in there somewhere. It might not have been in this life or a previous life, but it's all in there. So it's going to come out. So it's quite enlightening to be able to sit there and journal about it. You might nod off, but then you wake yourself up again and you have another piece of insight. So you make more notes and figure out what it was, the homework you were assigned to. And before they shut everything down and you go start your ceremony, they will check on you, make sure you're okay. And then they throw handfuls of soil on the tarp and they say nice words about you. That's very emotional. Whoa. And then you start your ceremony. So it's really like you've died and they've put you in the grave. And then when you come out, it's like you're reborn again and you have more appreciation for life. The other one we did was the Night on the Mountain of Fear. And that is, fear can stop you in so many ways. And that's when I was able to brave through that, sitting in a lawn chair, in a camping chair, you have your circle of stones around you, and you say your prayers, you sit yourself down. I mean, it gets cool in the night, usually around 4 a.m. And you've got your covers, your clothes, whatever, layers and layers on, your bug jacket on. And then again, you're not going to take out your flashlight because that's just going to attract the mosquitoes, but you need to really be going inside. You've got your notebook if you need to, but it's really about just sitting there all night, wide awake. And just, you can walk around in your own circle, but you're wide awake and you're just watching the moon come up through the clouds. It was so magnificent. And listening to the squirrels that you would swear was like 300 squirrels. One squirrel can make such a racket. And to be able to take the fears as they come up and see it for what it is. It's like, there's no axe murderers here. There's no any of that. You're not in danger of anybody attacking you. And there's other people around. So if you scream bloody murder, somebody's going to come to your rescue. They're going to hear you, especially my voice. You could have heard me 6 miles away. So that was a very, very powerful experience.
I bet.
And then I had my visions.
Now, did you, like, the next day, did you share, or do you keep it all internal and your notes you had, but did you have a forum for sharing what you've learned or hearing others' stories as well?
Absolutely. So they gathered us all up in the morning around 5:30 a.m., 6, and you just all gather in your circle, and then you do your debriefing. And so they tell you, they ask you a few questions, and who had a hard time, who didn't, and did they gain anything. I remember going on one ceremony where I was out for a couple of days and coming back and saying, no, I didn't, I totally wrecked it. I didn't do a very good ceremony. It was awful. And all I got was this great big grizzly bear that came, and she was really pissed off that we're ruining Mother Earth and that we should stop. And I'm bawling. And of course, my teacher started to laugh. She said, yeah, Linda, like, you got nothing. There are no grizzly bears in Ontario. And she was just laughing at me. She says, and you don't think that was a divine message? I went, oh, yeah, maybe it was. Like, I was totally ripped apart because this grizzly bear had talked to me. This big, big mother grizzly bear. And I hadn't seen it as a vision. I thought I totally did the ceremony wrong or whatever. Those funny kind of things that come up. And then I could see myself and go, of course, that's what it was.
So you finished this week of amazing, insight to your subconscious, and this experience must have been just so enlightening. And then you come home to the real world. And so how do you keep, I have a friend, and she went on a silent retreat, and I guess a word fast, and another country, and she couldn't speak for a week. And so she said she came home, and when she came home, it took her a long time to kind of assimilate back into the real world. And she was very aware, like very observant of everything. Her awareness was at a peak. And so how do you, and then over time, of course, it dissipates because we all get back into our regular habits. And so I thought, first of all, I want you to share what your husband said, because I thought that was super interesting about the difference between when you went to other events and this one.
Yeah.
And then also, how did you keep that up? I know you said you continued and you joined the school. So how did you continue to do the work, and what did that look like for you?
Well, before you leave, in our closing ceremony, they will tell you not to talk about the what went on, not to go about your ceremonies or what you learned. They said, just keep it to yourself for a week. Most people won't understand anyway because it's so far out of context. Now, I think the people in your group that are watching this are more evolved and enlightened than somebody standing in the grocery store line that I would explain this to. And what my husband said, the big difference that he saw was that I came home more peaceful. And he said all the other things that I had tried, I went to Wicca school for one weekend, and all kinds of other things that I had tried out. He said, when you came home, you couldn't stop talking about it. And it was like you were pushing it and you were trying to convert everybody else to do what that was the way that you'd found it. And he said, with this, you never pushed it. You just lived it. You integrated it. It became you. And it was like, yeah, this is what I'm doing. This is who I am. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning, he told people that I was going on a spiritual retreat. And I said, they don't understand and you can't explain it. So just tell them I've gone camping. That's all. I've gone camping. I've gone to Toronto for the weekend. They don't have to know I'm camping with 200 people and doing ceremony and sweat lodges and all that stuff.
Yeah.
They don't understand it, and it's none of their business.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, so how then you did 4 years of this school?
I ended up doing 6. The first class that I graduated from was a 4-year program, and then it was 2 years after that. I think it was 3, and then I did 2, and then I did an additional year after that.
So I assume you were still working in your corporate career, and then did this as a part-time thing?
It was 6 weekends in the year. Mm-hmm. And then we had going away for the week in the month of August. Mm-hmm. Later on, as I was in there more years, there were 2 different weeks that we could go away. So the senior students would have a week earlier on, and then in August, it was the new initiates.
Mm-hmm. Now, were your kids, you said they were teenagers when you started?
No, they had left home.
Okay.
So they were off on their own, and we had even changed cities. We'd moved.
Okay.
And so they were on their own. They didn't need me around. So it was the shift in values because, when you're all involved in your family, that's your number one value. But now I had time to look at my own values, and spirituality came right up the list to be one of my top 5 values.
Yeah. And just so the listeners know, Linda is a Catholic by, I guess.
Recovering Catholic. I was raised Catholic.
She was Catholic, yeah, by birth, I guess I wanted to say. So so you did have a lot of religion in your upbringing, but yeah. So I was asking because at first I thought they were teenagers when you went on your quest, but you were saying when they were teenagers, you kind of had this inkling you wanted this. You had something was missing. But you were so busy.
And I couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, like so many of us. Like I had a full-time corporate job, super busy, and then my kids were in sports, and it was like they were number one when I got home from work. And so everything goes to the wayside or the back burner someday, one day type of thing.
And then when one day comes, you have to say yes.
Yeah.
It's like, why not? Why wouldn't I say yes?
Yeah.
What's the worst case scenario? What's the best case scenario? I've wasted time before, and this was going to be a good thing. And it turned out to truly, truly be a fabulous experience because I know for a fact that I would not be where I am today had I not taken those years of training, because my very first intent on my first day of class was I wanted a quantum leap in spirituality. Well, what I learned by the end of the year was you can't quantum leap just spirituality. You can't have a mega leap in spirituality and not have all the other stuff. So you can't just it's out of balance. So you need to be raising your emotional, your physical, your mental, and your spiritual. Everything needs to rise up. And when you do that, that's when your life starts to sculpt and become more whole, and your values are getting very, very clear to you.
Right. And I love it because when we invest, we always tend to say, no, I can't. It's either too much money or I don't have enough time or I'm too busy or whatever. But when you invest in yourself, you are also investing in the relationships that you have with other people. And you're investing in making this a better world, because when we're better, it's like the thing Oprah says, better, you do better. But you just like, I see just your soul shining through and sparkling, basically. And that is a gift to the world. And so by denying that, I urge people who are listening to explore and to see, because we are so caught up in this ego, our mind and the conscious world. And there's so much, that's just such a small, itty bitty percentage of what it is really the truth. So yeah, we sound like a little crazy, but anyway.
I've given that up. See, my son-in-law said, you're really weird. This was before he was my son-in-law. He said, you're really weird, but you're weird in a really good kind of way.
Yes.
Yeah, especially when I saw a previous life that he and my daughter had, like when they were brother and sister hundreds of years ago. And he's like, wow. I said, yeah. I said, you'll get used to it.
Yes.
They just get used to it, that, that's the way my channeling comes. It just all comes out, just pours out.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, that's cool.
People have that, and they just haven't tapped into it. It's like it's a faucet that is like plugged up with junk.
And I think we all have it, and I think it's going to be taught in schools. It may not be this year or next year, but it certainly needs to be taught in school. And all the kids that read Harry Potter, they all know they can tap into that.
Yeah,
they know there. And that's what I found after doing this and after writing my book, is that my mission now is to teach others. It's my gift.
Yeah.
So my gift is to pass that on. And if I could share the zest with people so they have a better life, so that they have better relationships and better understanding, then that's my gift to share. Right. And to be of service.
How did the book come about? What made that happen? You wrote it about 4 years ago, or?
It launched in 2015, November of 2015. Whoa, it's almost 4 years ago. Yeah, I think it's November 13th because it's my son's birthday. So that's when I did my big book launch. Okay. And it came about because I was sitting in a circle of women, and it was a dream circle, not dream analysis, but a dream circle where we shared our dreams, our night dreams, not our daydreams. Whole process is fascinating. And one of the women, I said something, and one of the women said, wow, if you did a workshop on that, I'd come. All right, really? And I started doing some homework. I did some, the market analysis. I did some research, and I started to put things together, and there was an interest in it. And so that's what I put together. It wasn't Zest Your Life at the time, but it did have the emotional zest, mind, body zest, spiritual, sexual zest, and live your zest. And I did that whole round once. Then I rewrote the workbooks because I'm a professional trainer. So it was all very organized. I rewrote those things. Then I did it again. And this time I added on the vision board. And so I added the vision board on, and then I rewrote it again into a manuscript. And that's why when you open the book, it has worksheets in it that you can actually print off a whole workbook so that you can answer the questions and work through the questions. Awesome. Tough questions like, who has your power?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. So I so appreciate you joining me today and sharing your spiritual journey and what led you to it. And, one thing that I would, I think maybe some of the listeners would be interested in is, what is the name of this place that you were, and it's clearly a Canadian company, but, should they Google if they want to do something similar? How would they go about finding something like that?
They can connect me directly. The school I was originally involved with has changed and evolved and shifted, so they're not providing the same services anymore as they once did. Okay. But if they can connect with me, and I can connect them also with my own personal shamanic teacher. And of course, I've connected to many more since then.
Okay. Great.
But certainly they can connect with me because I host women's retreats. I'll come down and see you. I'll do all this stuff over a weekend. Okay. We could spend, 4 or 5 days. I'll come down. We can host something for a group of women. And that's what I did here in January.
Yeah.
I rented a beautiful mansion, and we had a very powerful 4 days.
Good. I want to do a live event. So maybe this is like, the little whisper from the universe. So, okay. And they can, zestyourlife.com is where they can find you. And
Okay, that site now bounces over to lindababulic.com.
okay. All right. Well, that's harder to spell. So if they just go to Zest Your Life, that's easier to remember.
It should still be bouncing. If it doesn't, they can contact you.
Yeah. Redirect. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. And we'll see each other.
We will.
All right.
We will.
Okay.
Thank you.